What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Real Talks with Jakub, where I interview doers, achievers, and go-getters and how they've created their own luck and became successful. And today we are here with Agnes Bilik from Netherlands. Agnes is a podcaster and agency owner, and she's helping people launch and produce their own podcasts. She started a raw and real podcast where she's telling stories of entrepreneurs and inspiring personalities while focusing on challenges, struggles, failures, and fears. Her goal is to provide more transparency and actionable insights for people that want to start their own business. So welcome to the show, Agnes.
Thank you so much, Jacob. I'm super excited to talk to you.
How does it feel to be in a guest position for a change now?
Well, it's really interesting because in a way you have to give up control. But at the same time, I think it's also nice because someone else has to guide you.
Oh yeah. So are you a control freak?
Well, sometimes maybe.
Anyway, the story how we met is quite interesting because I think Miha Matlievsky connected you with me, right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we just scheduled a call. We've been chatting for a couple minutes, and yeah, I was actually quite inspired by your approach, thorough approach when it comes to podcasting. You told me that you're preparing for 2 days for each episode, that you like go through everything, every information possible out there about your guest, which is impressive, and we will get into it. But my first question is, who is Agnes? Tell me about your story. When did it all start?
So I think an important part of my story is, so I'm originally from Austria and I came to the Netherlands around 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I moved here for my ex-boyfriend, and I started working a job as a recruiter here. So I was responsible for their offices in Germany, and I was recruiting recruiters, and I was very unhappy in that job. So I was really micromanaged a lot. I wasn't really growing. I was recruiting every month for the same position, and I felt really, really stuck. And because I'm an expat also here in the Netherlands, I was kind of constructing my own walls and think, oh my God, like I have to stay in this job. I don't have any other opportunities. And, you know, I didn't really know what to do to change my situation. And then at some point I realized, oh my God, I'm missing growth. I want to learn, I want to develop. So I decided to do a master here because it's just a year. So it's a relatively small time investment. And after you have a lot of opportunities. And the funny part about my master here was then I wrote my master thesis in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Specifically, I interviewed founders on the topic of fear of failure and how it influences them in the evaluation of opportunities. And that was really exciting because I got to know such a different world. So I had to go out, go to startup events, meet people, and ask them for an interview if they would be willing to give me an anonymous 45-minute interview. And that was super interesting because people had really the chance to open up to me. So it was a really safe space, and I could ask them a bunch of questions about fear and how it would influence them in their daily activities and really dive into their emotions. So that really changed my own perspective, because for me, from the outside perspective, it seemed like these people that are actually entrepreneurs and really doing it, they are very confident people and they really know what they're doing, you know, and
but they're fighting their own fights inside, but they're not maybe good at sharing that publicly if somebody doesn't ask them. And I was actually pleasantly surprised because people react so well when you ask them to do an interview. They usually accept this offer, and they're so open. Do you have a similar experience with this?
Yeah, totally. But I think that it also depends a lot. I do feel like you need to establish that trust first and build a little bit of relationship, because I also noticed if you just like ask someone to be on a podcast, maybe after a talk, and this person is a little bit more an introvert, they can be quite skeptical, and they're more a little bit distant and be like, okay, let me check it out first, I'll
Hmm.
let you know, and let's have like email contact. So I do feel like it's a different base if you get to know someone just a little bit, like two touch points. You see them at an event, see them a little bit in person, they get to know your energy, and then I think usually it works out really well.
Absolutely, yeah. If usually people who are really like extroverted and open, or already have an experience being guests on a podcast, they accept right away. But these first timers, they usually need a little time to think about it, which is completely understandable.
Yeah, it is because it is something new.
Yes.
And at the same time, you also know that you're putting out something publicly, which is always something to think about.
Hmm. Agnes, let's take a step back. So you moved from Austria to Netherlands. Why did you choose Netherlands in particular?
Well, I did a study abroad during my bachelor studies in the United States, and
Wow.
I met my ex-boyfriend in the States, and he was Dutch.
Ah,
So
right. Okay, got it now. All right. So United States, tell me about what did you see as a, because it's always interesting to hear the answer to this question from European perspective. As an European from Austria, I'm from Czech Republic, so we have a quite similar mindset. When you travel to US, what were the biggest changes in or differences between US mindset and Europe mindset you've noticed?
So, what I really loved about the US, especially New York, is to see how open and happy people were. So, usually you see that a lot of people are working three jobs.
Hmm.
And it was just so interesting for me to see that people were just so happy still while like working on the subway, you know?
Yes.
And I think, for example, in Austria, people tend to complain way more.
Okay. All right. So in New York or in US in general, you saw that people are quite happier,
Yeah.
or they seemed happier. That
They
doesn't
for
mean that
sure
they're
seemed
happy.
happier. But they were also in general very open when you were standing somewhere close to the subway with a map or just looking confused
Okay,
to help out and be like, hey, where are you going? Yeah, let me walk with you. So like very proactive in that sense,
that's
which
interesting. Yes, in Central Europe, in Austria, Czech Republic, people would look at you weird when you would do that, right?
yeah, totally. So it's the same kind of here in the Netherlands and in Austria as well.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Agnes, let's talk about your podcast. Your podcast is called Raw and Real, which is almost, which is half my podcast is Real Talks with Jacob. So you are actually raw and real. So it's more real than my podcast. So tell me about how did it all start, and how did you decide to start a podcast? Why?
So as I mentioned before, for me, a lot changed when I heard the struggles of people, of these
Yes.
like really entrepreneurs. So my perception of what I would be capable of changed with that a lot. And it really empowered me. And as I know what it's like to be stuck in a job that you really don't like, where
Hmm.
you just don't have a drive at all, I just wanted to give that feeling to other people as well. And because I just like enjoyed it so much and I loved diving into this world, I kind of didn't want to leave it. And then at some point, a person came back to me and he was like, hey, Agnes, that interview we had was really special and it made me
Yes.
feel, I think you should really do something with this. And then I was like, what? I don't know how.
Hmm.
And that person actually connected me with two people. So one of them was Miha, and one of them was actually David de Kock, who I had on my podcast,
Hmm.
who back then just gave me a little bit of guidance. And I just had a talk with him about how it all started for him. And then he talked to me about his insecurities. And there were some really powerful things that he said that really helped me. Like, for example, he told me just like deal with insecurity the way that you ignore it, because it's always going to be there. So you just have to ignore it and do it. And
Mm-hmm.
he was also talking a lot about the fact that he was seeking the approval of his surrounding back then and doing the things that were expected from him, until one day he broke through that barrier. And then I realized that I was also really influenced by my parents, or back then my ex-boyfriend. And then I really managed to break through these barriers. And yeah, and then I really wanted to do it. I really enjoyed interviewing people, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, hey, I'm just gonna give it a try and see how it
Yes.
goes.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say that were the biggest limitations which have been holding you back? Was it that seeking of approval by people around you, or was it something else? And eventually, how did you overcome them?
I think you are in this hamster wheel because you're in a certain system. And when I was just done with my master, everyone was asking me, hey, Agnes, when are you going to start applying? Do you know already for which jobs you want to apply?
Hmm.
And I think for me, I just couldn't. I think it was just because I had such a horrible experience before, and that fear was kind of holding me back to be again at a company where it just like wouldn't develop and wouldn't grow, and would be just like horrible to wake up and go to the
Yes.
office.
Yes.
And I think what really helped me was that I was surrounded by these entrepreneurs. So I kept going to these events.
Mm-hmm.
I kept really being around these people. So I was actively seeking that. And that really empowered me because these people believed in me and they were like, hey, Agnes, you should do this. You can do this. And at the same time, then I didn't want to disappoint them in a way. And that really pushed me forward.
Why did you choose to not disappoint entrepreneurs you're interviewing, other than and not your parents or your ex-boyfriend?
Yeah, the funny part was since I stepped into this world, I had a different feeling. So I never really had that before, that I was like, oh my God, that's it,
Mm-hmm.
and that feeling really stayed. And that really changed something in me.
Mm-hmm. Did you, after that, change people you are meeting with? Because there's a saying that you're some total of five people you spend most time with. And if you be hanging around only employees, there's a way less chance that you will end up as an entrepreneur. So when you found that you like this community and when you like being around them, did you end some relationships with people from your previous life before you met this entrepreneurship community?
Yeah, I think it automatically shifts in a way because these people are kind of more empowering, and you want to spend more time around it
Mm-hmm.
because maybe that's how you see your life going forward. So I totally agree that it it has a big influence on you, the people around you. And then yeah, I my contact definitely changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you found out that you were good in podcasting, was it actually um, the first time when you got an idea to start your own agency?
Can you repeat that a little bit?
Yes. So was it because of your podcast that you decided to start your own agency?
Yes. So at some point, I became better at it. And then I also got my first sponsor. And
Nice.
yeah, then I was like, okay, now I have to start something. There's no
So
way to put it off.
that's really interesting. So how did you find that? How did you find that sponsor, or did this sponsor find you?
Yeah. So the interesting part about getting a sponsor, in my opinion, is knowing their problem
Mm-hmm.
and being the solution for the problem. So I think key is a lot of information. So in my case, I knew that the company wanted to build a growth team. And, finding growth hackers also here in Amsterdam is not that easy. It's
Okay.
like a trendy term. And at that time, I knew that I would interview David Anu from Growth Tribe, which is like a fast growing company here in Amsterdam. and all of the growth marketeers follow that company, Growth Tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that I'm going to get him on the podcast. So if they would sponsor my episode, they would have the possibility to be present in his network, because obviously he shared it then through his own channels.
That's amazing.
And sponsoring a podcast is like a really non-pushy way
Mm-hmm.
to be present in someone's network. Plus, the nice part is I post a lot if I put out a new episode. So then I also tag the sponsor in each post on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is also very beneficial.
They're basically buying content from you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Love it. So you're already getting sponsors, which is wonderful, and you're already building agency on the side. So if you could decide, I don't have, I'm not telling that you have to decide, but what would you like to make more like serious, more full time, more money generating business, podcast or your agency?
Phew, that's a very hard question. That's a very hard question because I love teaching people something. So I
Uh-huh.
love sharing knowledge, and
Uh-huh.
it's a very unique feeling if you can help someone um, building something, being
Yes.
part of something, and seeing how that grows. But at the same time, I love the connection that
Mm-hmm.
arises during an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can really go deep with someone and create something where you're sure that it's at least people are going to think about it and it's going to change the perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you
I like
know?
what you're saying, that you're building a connection with people you are doing podcasts with. And I mentioned this on a couple of my previous podcasts, and I think that this is one of the most overlooked aspects of podcasting, because so many podcasters, when they start, they're focusing way too much on that, on an audience, right? They will see that only 5 people listen to their episodes, and they're like, okay, it doesn't make any sense to continue. But in reality, you're making a great relationship, great connection with your guest. So there's actually a book, really cool book on this topic, content-based networking, from James Carberry, where he describes how to leverage that. So I recommend it. So tell me about, how do you stay in touch with people you are interviewing, with your guests? How did it influence your network?
Yeah, some of them. So for me, again, so far I just did in-person interviews, and I definitely go to a lot of networking events where I see
Yes.
them again, and
Mm-hmm.
then I talk to them for a little bit, or write messages and just like, hey, how you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Or react to their Instagram story, or
Mm-hmm.
react to their post on LinkedIn. So I definitely think it's really important to keep building these kind
Mm-hmm.
of relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. We also had quite interesting discussion recently, and you mentioned it right now that you were doing in-person interviews. But regarding to that, it's not that easy right now due to all self-isolation and
For sure.
COVID-19 situation out there. So how are you adapting to this? Because it's not that easy to invite people to your studio, aka living room.
Yeah, so there are some people here that I have on hold, basically,
Yes.
exactly because of that situation. And obviously, people are not open to meet in person. So with with the people that I have here in Amsterdam, I'm just gonna wait for a couple months until the situation calms down, which means that for me, it's gonna be the same thing. I'm also gonna have to start working online and
Yes.
doing my first online interviews, which is always like a challenge in the beginning, especially also because of technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to find other ways to build a deep connection
Mm-hmm.
without having that atmosphere rising around you in
Yes.
person.
Um, it's interesting that you're saying that you need to find different ways to build a connection. Um, I found it quite challenging on the start too, because I was doing in-person interviews when I started interviewing people a couple of years back. It was all in person. Um, but more you do of these Zoom calls or whatever software you will use, you will start feeling similar feelings as you would be doing it normally in person. That you will find a way how to create connection and that rapport online too. So I mean, it's really about getting used to it, and of course, technical difficulty can be something complicated for somebody, but it's not that difficult. So when can we expect your first online interview, Agnes?
Well, I'm working on it, so I don't want to set a date yet, but I have some
Do
processes
it, set a date.
going.
It won't happen anyway.
I'll keep you in the loop.
All right. And who is the first lucky person?
Well, probably Roman Prokopchuk. I'm not sure if you know him.
No.
He's also a podcast host in the States, and actually Miha Matilevsky also connected me with him.
So are you in touch with Miha still?
Yes, I'm definitely in touch with him. Now and then we talk. I'm not sure how much contact you have.
Well, I've interviewed him here in my podcast. This episode will go live. Episode with Miha will go live quite soon. And I mean, he's a great dude.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's cover one last area, Agnes. Let's talk a little bit more about your agency. What is your vision with that? Where do you want to take it? Who are the people you want to help?
Well, I think there are a lot of people out there that are really focused on their business and they see that there's a big opportunity when it comes to the podcasting market.
Yes.
So, for example, lately I met up also with a YouTuber and she was like, "Oh, I see it already happening. Podcasting is currently what YouTube was like 5 years ago,
Yes.
that you can still grow fast,
Mm-hmm.
relatively given the amount of podcasts currently."
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such an interesting medium because you feel so connected to someone if you hear their story, and it's growing in popularity, and the consumption is just so easy because you can just like go on your app on your phone and just listen
Mm-hmm.
while
Mm-hmm.
traveling. So I do believe that it's a huge opportunity. It's great branding and people can really connect to you. So I think that just a lot of companies don't have the time to
Yes.
focus on it themselves. So I do think that there is a big opportunity to help them out and
Mm-hmm.
take over all of the organizational part
Yes.
and how does it work. And
I really like the USP you mentioned, that it allows to build connection. And if you like the golden rule on the YouTube is that the best length of the video is somewhere around 4 minutes. That these videos with this length get the best consumption. Facebook is even less. TikTok is a couple seconds. Instagram is around 30 seconds, 40 seconds. But with podcasts, people usually listen to the whole episode, which is amazing. And these episodes are from 30 minutes and up usually. So if you want it or not, you will build that bond, that connection with the person you're listening the voice from. And it really helps to then build a trust with your brand, either as a company or personal brand. So it's not that like lead generation strategy that you would start doing podcasts and then you would get more leads, but it's more like a branding asset, something like if you would be writing posts, blogs, and so on. So that's a great opportunity to tap in, and you're in a great market, Agnes.
plus, it's another touch point. So
Absolutely.
in the sales process, you usually need like 14 touch points, and it's again a different touch point.
Yes. And if you're smart about it, you can do the strategy we discussed, which is that you can leverage it to connect with great prospects, right? So let's say that you're selling, I don't know, CRMs, and you will start your smart sales rep podcast, and you will be inviting VP of sales, and these people are great guests for your shows as well. So you can leverage your podcast this way to create relationships with your potential prospects.
Yeah, for sure. That's also something that Tim Ferriss is doing. He's just getting the people on the show that benefit him the most. And he knows he will ask questions then where other people benefit
Yes.
from as well.
I mean, that's the way how we created the Tribe of Mentors, right? The book or Tools of Titan, something like that. One of these books where he sums up all these lessons from the people he interviewed with. He
Yeah.
did interviews, so it's amazing. So Agnes, I usually want to wrap up these interviews with something very actionable people can take and use maybe today or maybe next week. Um, so here's my question: there are just so many people who want to start their own podcast. They're thinking about it. They know that they have a message to share, but something is holding them back. They don't want to make that first step. I was going through that. I think you might have been through that as well. So, what would you
Yes.
recommend to these people who are still just deciding whether they want to start, but there's something holding them back?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to just have a vision of, do you want to do something on your own, or do you want to interview other people or have a co-host?
Hmm.
I think that should be the first step. And I would just tell someone to do a first interaction with a friend, with someone they feel safe
Yes.
with someone who can just give them feedback. And in the end, a podcast is a normal conversation. So also if you just meet up with a friend and talk, you can think about, okay, how would it be if we just record this conversation right
Hmm.
now? So I think that's really most important. Choose someone who you feel safe with,
Hmm.
and then you just see how it goes, and then you can go from there. And then you ask just other friends to give you a little bit of feedback,
Yes.
then you can improve a little bit. So I think it's just important to take small steps,
Hmm.
bring you in the right direction.
It's really about making that first step, right?
Exactly. Just like checking on YouTube, what do they recommend on
Hmm.
podcasting equipment?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then like really buying it as well. And again, it's just a normal conversation, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a normal conversation. I was actually doing calls with my friend, and we already have we had like a block of time scheduled in our calendars, and it was a sentence. The name of the event in the calendar was "This call should has been a podcast," and it was in quotes because we always said it after the call because we shared some like amazing value between each other, shared our struggles and so on. uh, and at the end of the call we were like, damn, this would be a good podcast episode.
Yeah,
So I mean, just guys, if you want to start a podcast, you're already having great discussions. The only thing is missing, which is that you're not recording them. So once you're having great conversation, great discussion, try to record it. If you want to be more serious, then like order some equipment as well to take it to the next level. Agnes, thank you very much. Last question: where can people learn more about you? Where can people listen to your podcast? Who should get in touch with you and where?
so first of all, my podcast is on all the major platforms available, like iTunes, Spotify. I'm on YouTube as well. It's called Raw and Real again. If you want to get in touch with me, I think I'm most active on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Agnes Bilik. You can also follow me on Instagram. And yeah, just everyone who had the feeling that I was sharing some value, or who just like wants to chat and grab a virtual coffee, I'm very open.
Unfortunately, right now, there's no other way to grab a coffee other than
Unfortunately.
virtual. All right, Agnes, thank you very much. Once again, people listen to Agnes' podcast. It's called Raw and Real. You can find it on all major platforms, or you can connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram just by searching her name. Agnes, thanks a lot for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And guys, please, if we shared some value with you, share this episode with your friends. If you're watching this on YouTube, just grab a link, send it to your friends in chat, or share it on YouTube. I mean, on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. social media platforms you use. Or you can just take a screenshot of the app you're listening this podcast on and do the same. Send it to your friends. And please share it because Agnes shared some amazing value here, and it'd be the shame if other people wouldn't hear it as well. So Agnes, thanks a lot again, and everybody, till next time.